We've been doing the speaker series for 4 years, and I've had the pleasure of introducing 21 business leaders to date. Every introduction has been special, but this one is extra special. It's unique because I have an opportunity to introduce my son, and that doesn't come along very often. Before I introduce you to David, I would like to introduce 3 very special guests. My students who are in the audience have heard me affectionately refer to Nancy as the War Department. What's the other? The boss. Let me introduce Nancy, my wife, and my best friend for over 50 years. Nancy. We are blessed to have a daughter, Melissa. And I got to tell you, we love her more than words can express. Melissa. Now, we've been surrogate parents for Keela. Keela came into our life as a teenager. She was a close personal friend of our daughter, Melissa, and they're very close to this day. David's amazing wife, Keela. Now, I want to share one interesting tidbit about David. Some might call it dirt, but I call it a tidbit. Of all the commitments that he has made to us, one stands out for 2 reasons. It's a unique commitment. I hate to say this, but it's the only one he has not fulfilled to date. Now keep in mind that David has a very generous heart. Just keep that in mind. His commitment came to light in the 4th grade, and it's one he reinforced over the years. And I've decided to share it with you. He committed to give us, get this, $100,000 per month when he grew up and got a job. Now, I did a little calculation last night. To fulfill his commitment, he would only have to write a check today for $24 million. Now, to demonstrate to each of you that I also have a generous heart, I want to tell you what I did. Recently, I informed David that we would agree to retire the debt in exchange for a one-time payment of a paltry, get this, $100,000. Now that's a 99.6% reduction in the debt. Wouldn't you think that's something that's love? While we have forgiven the debt of many millions, David has given us millions of reasons why we're grateful to have him as a son. We've challenged David in many ways throughout his life. To this very day, I continue to reinforce 2 challenges often, and for my students who are in the class or in the auditorium today, they know that McNeill is very repetitious. First, I asked David to be a principled and ethical person and business leader. Secondly, I asked him to always set his sights high and go for it. He's met both challenges and many more. David is here to talk about starting a business, now or in the future. He's well qualified to discuss startups. He's done it, and he's done it extremely well. Help me in giving David a warm North Georgia welcome.
Well, thank you. I think you can hear me okay. Well, I'm very happy to be here today. And I'll start off by saying, if there's anybody here that thought Rich McKay was speaking first week in October, apologies. You have Dick McNeill's son. I'm first week in October. He's first week in November. Let me tell you real quick, because I know our time's limited today, but let me tell you what we're going to talk about, and then we'll dig in. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about who I am. So a little about me personally, a little bit about my professional background. I think it'll be helpful just to frame some of the things I'm going to share later, a little bit about who I am and why I go about things the way that I do. I'm going to talk a little bit about the last 2 startups I've done. And actually, I'm going to share insights on a third one, which, while we made a little bit of money, I would consider it a pretty big bust. But there were some pretty good learnings that went along with it. So I'm going to talk on 3 of them. What I'm going to hit on next is what were the common themes in the startups that I've done, especially those where, we had some success. While startups fail, or in most cases just don't even get started, but really kind of die as a dream. And then lastly, I'll share some observations that I think might be useful at your stage in life, and you can take them for what they're worth. I'll start out, though, in the context of this whole thing, that startups are really more art, in my opinion, than science. And so what I'm sharing today is what I've done and what my partners have done, and I'm really hopeful that there'll be 1 or 2 takeaways, real pragmatic takeaways, that each of you will have after you hear me talk today. Not everything's going to resonate, but I'm hopeful that something does. Another thing which I'll just ask for in advance is, if you hear me use the word I as I'm going through this, assume I've got an issue with the pronoun, because it's really we. So I've got 2 really great partners that I have in my current venture. I had partners in the last one that I did as well, and it really isn't a one-man show. So I've had some great partners that have put me in a position where I can actually talk with you today. If not for them, I wouldn't be able to. So with that, what I'll do first is let me just tell you a little bit about the things that are important to me so you have a sense for who I am. And my dad talked a little bit about family. I'll share in a little bit more detail about my family. Here are some pictures. You met Keela, my wife, and you met my mother, Nancy. I'm also blessed to have 4 little girls. So you see Haley, Carly, Maddie, Riley. As we like to joke, I've got my daily occurrence of a G-rated version of Girls Gone Wild. So I'm outmanned. We have 2 female dogs. I don't have a chance. So that's my family. My dad did point out that the picture of Keela and I happened to submit a picture that had booze in it, or a glass of wine. We have 4 kids. We don't get away very often. We were in the Dominican Republic. Every picture we have has wine in it, so that's all you got. Talk about faith. So it's a critical component of who I am and what I do and how I go about it. My wife and I not only attend 12 Stone Church, we're actually quite involved, and we serve in a lot of different capacities. I love to read, and you see some authors up there: Malcolm Gladwell, Michael Lewis, David McCulloch, a great historian, C.S. Lewis, and I'll share this as well. C.S. Lewis had a great statement, which was, there are no original thinkers. We are all just plagiarists in different forms. There's a whole lot of reading I do. There's a lot of podcasts I listen to. And so if I share something today that I don't attribute specifically to somebody, it's just an oversight. It's not me trying to claim something as my own. Football, at the risk of alienating certain fans of the Bulldogs. Auburn Tiger, Dallas Cowboys. At least I have the Atlanta Falcons this year because everybody else is really stinking it up. And I like to exercise. So what's not on here, so again, I start off, these are the things that I'm passionate about, the things that are important to me. You don't see anything about a job up there. You don't see anything about career up there. And not that it's not important, but it is so secondary into everything else that I really care about. I have a lot of friends who say I could never retire. I'm going to work till the day I die. They don't have enough hobbies. There's a whole lot of other stuff I'm interested in. And so what I try to do with work is find stuff that is fun, with people that I like, doing something that's going to have some value to folks. So have some fun, make some money, and spend your time where it's going to be most meaningful. Let me give you a sense for my background, and I'm going to walk you through real quick in bullet point fashion the different jobs I've had and schooling that I had. And it'll build up to how I ended up doing a startup, because when I first got out of Auburn University in 1989, I wouldn't have been qualified to do a startup in any shape or form. When I got out, my mindset was I want to get the best job I can that's going to help me get into the best business school I can a couple of years down the road. And that was just the way we had been raised over and over, that you're going to get out, you're going to get a good job, you'll go to grad school in some discipline, and then you'll figure it out from there. After Auburn, I went to IBM, and I was a sales and marketing representative with IBM for about 2.5 years. Great sales training program for about a whole year. When I finished working at IBM before I went back to grad school, I was no more ready to do a startup than I was when I got out of Auburn. And I don't say that to say that some of you are not in that position, because there's somebody in the room that could go out and knock it out of the park tomorrow. That just wasn't me. And again, the whole thing here, it's more art than science. What was the truth for me isn't necessarily going to be the truth for everybody. But when I finished with IBM, I went to UNC and I got my MBA. And to give you a little bit of sense for how my mindset was different back at that point in life than it is today, when I got to UNC, I decided that when I graduated, I was going to either work for Bain, BCG, or the Boston Consulting Group, or McKinsey. And it was really simple. I didn't know what any of them did. They were constantly listed as the most desired company to work for when they pulled Harvard Business School, Stanford Business School, Northwestern. And concurrent with that, they paid the most money. And so I thought, I want to make the most money. I want to get a job with a strategy consulting firm. And somehow or other, that happened. And so for those of you that aren't familiar with Bain, you might have heard the Bain because Mitt Romney came from Bain, and Obama's been kind of barraging it a little bit. To give you a sense for what Bain is, strategy consulting firm, you're typically working at the CEO level of large companies. And I was really fortunate to spend 5 years with Bain, 3 different offices, 2 continents. And it was an equal mix of projects and strategy development, operations improvement, and mergers and acquisitions. It's about a 70-hour-a-week job. I worked every single Saturday. I worked every Sunday. And it's almost the battered wife syndrome where I felt like I had to come back. If I got out a half day early on Sunday, I felt really good about it. I thought, man, I scored today. So it was a really busy job. You learned a ton. Truth be told, I learned a whole lot more than any value my clients ever got. But it was a fantastic learning experience. And in 1999, I made the decision that the earnings opportunity was better in private equity than it was in consulting. So I left Bain and I went to a company called Texas Pacific Group, which I'd be surprised if anybody knows by name, but TPG, or private equity, the simplest way to think about it if you're not familiar with that market, you get a group of folks together, you go out and get commitments for a whole lot of money from different people. You say, we're going to go buy companies, we're going to improve them, we're going to sell them, we're going to make a lot of money, and you'll make a lot of money. So the companies TPG owned were Bally, the shoe and leather good company, Neiman Marcus, Burger King, Domino's, Dunkin' Donuts. It's a whole lot of companies you're familiar with, but you might not own that at one point in time they were owned by TPG. I went out of the fire into the frying pan. So I thought I worked a lot at Bain, and I got to TPG, and that's all I did. And it was every Saturday, and it was every Sunday, and it was nonstop travel. And it was about as special of a company as you could be associated with, but you really did have to sell your soul to it. And it was one of those points in life where you come to an inflection point, and you know you're either going one direction or the other. And my wife and I were just starting to have kids, and we made the decision, we're going to get off this train now while we can. And at that point in time, I was the first person to ever leave TPG, and people thought, you are absolutely nuts, because the earnings opportunity was just through the roof, absolutely nuts. But we decided to do something different. And what I'll tell you is one of the things I had an interesting opportunity to do at TPG in 2000, early 2000, and to give you a little history, the NASDAQ was trading at about 5,000. In early 2000, they put $500 million to work in 3 companies in the telecom space in Denver. And I was given the opportunity to partner up with one of the senior folks, or they brought in a new CEO for a company, and they said, shadow this guy, let's make sure we can turn this entity around. It was a $220 million revenue company, was burning through $16 million a month in cash, and they said, make this investment work, partner up with this guy. He and I really hit it off, and he asked if I would come on board full-time for a year position to help him run it in his number 2 position. And I decided I was going to push to go do it. And the analogy I would use, it's like a young surgeon just out of med school, really doesn't know what he or she is doing, but you get put into a war situation. You probably do more surgeries in a year than a typical doctor would do really in a lifetime. And that was the opportunity I had in that environment, to go in and really learn what it meant to manage something. Up until then, I would say most of what I was gaining was knowledge, and it was really now starting to translate into some wisdom. Actually really understanding what I could do, knowing what I didn't know, and so forth. When I left TPG, and one of the things going to a Bain or a TPG, one of the things it does is it puts you in a position to be qualified for jobs that quite honestly you're not qualified for. But there's prestige behind the company, and people think you're smarter than you really are. And somebody made me the opportunity to come and take over a CEO role with a company called PartsMaster. And this was a distributor of industrial products, fasteners and welding alloys and cutting tools and some just good boring stuff, but that makes a lot of money. I did that for about 5 years, and while I was doing it, I had the thought for the first startup that we did, and I'm going to give you a little bit more context in a second on that. But that startup was a company called Coldfire, and I'll give you more context on the next slide, but we licensed a certain industrial technology we bought, and we licensed our trademark, and that was what that company was. And we were fortunate enough to be able to sell that and make a pretty good return. And from there, in 2010, we started a current company called Strand, and I'm going to give you a little more context for what that is. And this is with a couple of my partners that I was with at Coldfire. So let me start and give you a little context on what Coldfire was. So you see a reciprocating saw blade, and it's difficult to see with the graphics, but it's rigid branded, and there's a Coldfire brand on the right side of it. When I was at this company, Parts Master, we sold all these tools, and I first got in, and one of the first things I did is there's 1,000 products we sold. I wanted to understand where we really made money. And so we went in, we did a cost accounting activity where we went through and did a product line profitability analysis. Really understand where we make money. There was a private line of product we sold called Cryo Tool, and it was based on a cryogenic technology one of the guys in our marketing department had seen on the Discovery Channel. He bought a machine for $20,000, what the company did, but he facilitated it. We put it in our facility, we treated product, and we sold it under our brand. About 2 days every month, I would go ride with our sales reps, and every single rep led with this product. It was our most profitable item, or all the family of product, our most profitable products, had the highest commission for the sales reps, and the simple observation was we should really do something more with this technology. We didn't own anything though, we just had bought this machine on the internet. So it was kind of a slow growth business. We were having some financial challenges when I took over. And so rather than try to pursue growth with this cryogenic concept inside Parts Master, decided we might want to look at something else. And so I ended up getting into a senior merchant at Home Depot. And a merchant is just a buyer. These are the people that buy the products you and I then buy off the shelf. So the merchant who bought power tool accessories took a meeting with me. Just for some context, I had tried for a year to get in contact with this individual, and he wouldn't return calls. And as a buyer, you get hundreds of calls and hundreds of emails every week from people that want to sell you product. Because I leveraged the Bain network, so Bain was the consulting group I had been with, and I continue to network all the time, and I keep up with a lot of people from Bain. I called a guy, he said, I know exactly who that person is, and the guy returned my call 5 minutes later, and he took a meeting. So we got to this guy, and we pitched him on this concept, where I flew down to Atlanta, I was living in Dallas at the time, and I said, we are the world leader in cryogenic treatment of industrial cutting items. And nobody tracks that market, so that could have been a true statement. We have no idea, but that was the pitch. And he was looking at putting new drill bits on the wall, and we hit him with this concept of, you could take our technology, you can force one of your vendors that sells you products to pay us a fee to treat it, and you'll have something exclusive to you. Because at that time, one of the biggest issues that Home Depot faced with their vendors is DeWalt would have product come off a manufacturing line, it would go in one box to Lowe's, one box to Depot, the exact same product. And so we went in to Depot and said, we'll give you exclusivity, we've got this technology, no one's done it as much as we have. When the merchant said he was interested, at that point I hired a guy who had worked for me in a prior life at one of my other companies, said, help me set this concept up. And so we started going out and visiting the people that had these little companies with this cryogenic technology. And we ended up buying a little company called Coldfire. And what Coldfire did prior to that is you had a guy who used to sell ovens and freezing equipment to NASA, set up this company, and he would sell 1 or 2 machines a year. And I went and I sat down with him, and we had already done all the economics on what we thought the business was worth to Home Depot and what their vendors were going to have to pay us. And I went and sat down with him, and I knew I was going to spend, if it was less than $1 million, we were going to do it on the spot, and up to $2 million, we would have felt pretty good about buying this guy's company. And I sat down with him, and he said, David, he said, before we even get started, because I'd indicated I wanted to talk about potentially buying his company, he said, I know how these things work. The deal is it's 2 years of last year's sales. And I said, well, what was your sales last year? And he said, well, last year we did $115,000. I said, well, that's a pretty rich price. When we think about it, I'll have to get back to you. I mean, ultimately, we ended up buying this company for $225,000, which worked out pretty well because we started cash flowing the business in the first month. But so that's how we got into the business. It was literally, we've got a product we're selling in this one industry. It's smoking it in the marketplace. Our sales reps are selling it. It's the easiest product to demo. And literally by taking some data, putting it together and putting it in front of a merchant at Home Depot saying, this can help you sell more product at the high end and in the retail space, that ultra premium space is where they tend to make the most money or the most profit. He got excited about it. It was exclusive to Home Depot. So we set up this company. It was funded by the owners of NCH Corporation, which was the billion-dollar entity I was working for. It was a private entity. I'd actually joined them originally to help take them private. They were a public company at the time. I ended up running the division. So they put in $225,000. We went out and bought these assets. For that $225,000, they had the majority ownership position. Myself and my partners took a sweat equity position, which means we just earned our ownership in the company through doing all the work. One of the greatest things personally about Coldfire, and I'll mention this too, all the stuff I said is important to us personally. We decided early on, before we ever started this company, that the company was going to have to fit around our lifestyles. So we started the company and we said we're not going to work any more than a half day on Fridays, not going to work nights, not going to work weekends, and we're not going to travel. And most of the people that had done startups I was friends with said, you were smoking something, there's no way that's going to happen. And we just made it happen. We never worked a Friday afternoon. In fact, it turned into all-day Fridays. We would work out in the morning, we'd do a few emails, we'd talk for an hour about where we were going to have lunch that day, we'd have lunch, and then we'd hit the road. It turned into a great lifestyle job, so licensing technology is really a nice way to go. But while we were there, we thought, we've got extra time, let's do another startup. So the guy we bought Coldfire from was kind of a crazy creative type. And he took the $225,000 we had paid him, and he's really into cars. So he bought one of the, this was back in 2004, he bought one of the new Mustangs that had just come out, and they were kind of the older body style Mustangs. And put a star there, that one was a success. This one, a company called Renale, I would say was a bit of a failure. But let me give you some context. So this guy built this car, he tricked it out in all kind of different ways, and he was driving down the road one day, and somebody said, man, that car is awesome, where did you get it? And he said, I'll build you one. He's truly an entrepreneur, but he doesn't really understand economics at times, but he's a good, real creative guy. So we started building cars for people. And he came to Atlanta one day. We didn't really utilize him after we bought the company, but we kept in touch with him. He came to Atlanta and he told us he had sold 16 cars, and he had made a lot of money at it. We had just hired somebody in new that was going to run sales for us. He hadn't really engaged yet. So we said, tell you what, take your activity for a little while and let's focus on this car thing. This guy came up with the name Renale, which is just Eleanor spelled backwards. That was the name of the car, and Gone in 60 Seconds, which was popular at the time. We ended up being put on the cover of Mustang 5.0 magazine, or 5.0 Mustang. We had all this incredible inertia. We had all this cool stuff happening, and we thought this was going to be great. And it turned out it was the biggest pain in the butt in the entire world. None of us really knew anything about cars. Even the guy that was doing the build out, turns out most of the 18 cars he had sold broke down and stuff started falling off. And it looked like a great story, but it just turned out to be horrible. We had dealers that had bought cars that then started saying, or we started just getting bills from them because they started figuring out that they had all this extra work they had to do to get them ready for sale. None of us really were that committed to it. It ended up taking a whole lot of time, and the only thing that actually made us make money on it is that we lost money financially that year. We got a pretty good savings from our tax loss, and then we had a guy that ended up buying the company for minimal dollars. It was just a real pain in the butt, and I'll get through some of the takeaways on what I learned from that, but I probably got as much out of that experience as I did out of the ones that were successful. And so I just wanted to share that one. Every now and then I'll still see one of these cars driving on the road and I think, oh God, I got to move over a couple lanes because I don't know what's going to happen. My last one is Strand. And rather than try to explain Strand, I'm going to show a quick video that we have on our website. What I'll tell you though is we compete in a space that does product testing. The simplest way to think about what we do is we do a consumer report type testing for merchants, the people that buy product. So they have 20 people trying to sell them product. Every one of them, everybody's trying to sell them products as ours is the best. Ours is the best. And they all can't be right. And so we're the ones that help try to tell the merchant what's right so they can negotiate better against the vendors and they can put a better product on the wall. But if you look at any lab's website or you look at any of their promotional material, it's so dense, it's so dense with engineering language that it just doesn't make sense to anybody unless you are a PhD mechanical engineer. And so we try to have a little bit more of a creative slant to what we did, and this video just gives you a little bit of a sense for what the offering is.
Hi, we are Fourth Strand. You are a buyer, or a merchant, or a distributor, or perhaps you're even someone in procurement responsible for buying the products for internal use within your own company. Either way, when it's time to decide which products to carry, it's important that you know the brand strength of any potential vendors, their track record, and their pricing. Even though this important process takes a lot of time and attention, you're always left with the feeling that something's missing from the analysis. Like each vendor's true product performance. How do they measure up against features most critical to the customer? Customers simply want to know who is best at incorporating the features they most care about. Well, you already know that some vendors give you the results of their own tests, and have you ever noticed how their test results always seem to find their product to be the best? Of course, you could use an outside test lab to create data, but can they also transform it into meaningful insight that you can then use in your negotiations with potential vendors? Or do you get some fat report written in some unfamiliar language that never tells you who's best? And do you really have the time to manage all of this? And which lab is the best one for you? And who's going to gather the samples for testing? Who monitors all of this? And how do you find your way through all the data and find the leverage that you need with each vendor? That's where Fourth Strand comes in. It's simple to get started and requires little time commitment. We'll meet you at your store or wherever you are in order to get your input before we jump into action. Our clients tell us that we maximize their time in a highly effective way while you do all the other important parts of your job. We'll analyze the findings from every possible angle to uncover facts about your potential products. We'll combine the test results and Fourth Strand's secret sauces to not only give you the info you need, but also help you create compelling ways to use your results. We'll talk to your vendors along the way about performance or quality issues we uncover to help minimize back-end vendor objections that could slow you down. We are a group of general managers, strategists, artists, and engineers. No, not those engineers, these engineers. Unlike anything you've ever seen before, we understand your business, blending art, science, and information to help you acquire the best performing product on your store shelf, increasing customer satisfaction, cutting your cost, and building your brand. This is what we do. This is who we are. We are Fourth Strand.
Thank you. We shot that on a whiteboard in our office. We had a guy draw the pictures, we wrote the script, we had a friend that had a cool voice, and we just shot it in our office and we threw it up. Fourth Strand, so we indicated what it was. We do consumer report type testing, but just to give you a sense for how it started, when we had cold fire, we had to show Home Depot, whoever the client was, that we actually improved the product. So we had to test it. And at one point, the merchant that I was working with made the comment, we have 10 vendors bidding on this line, everyone says they're the best. I said, hey, what if we put some data to that and actually proved it out? He said, boy, that'd be great. So I said, well, do you mind if I charge your vendors for it? He said, not a problem. So in essence, if you're a vendor or a company and you want to put your product on the shelf at Home Depot, you have to pay us to test your product to get it spec'd out or get it vetted before it goes on the shelf. And so it's one of those situations where it's always easier to spend somebody else's money than your own. It's easier for Home Depot to force their vendors to pay us money to make sure the product is not going to hurt their brand name. And so that's how we got started with Fourth Strand. It was more of a concept. It became a side offering. And the reason we sold Cold Fire, we got to the point that Home Depot really put all the value on what we did was in this side offering, this testing service, as opposed to the licensing technology. So we packaged up that company, we sold it to Milwaukee Electric Tool, and we started Fourth Strand. So we started it 2 years ago. We were very fortunate this year to be recognized out of over 600 entries with one of the best small companies to work for in the greater Atlanta area. And you see it up there. We started this one with no money. So it was myself and two partners. It's a professional services type business. You don't need a lot of cash to get going. And we were fortunate that we started making money out of the gate. And we were able to sell it earlier this year to a company called Intertech PLC. Intertech is a large testing and certification company. So odds are at least half the people in this room, your clothes were certified in China or in India or in Mexico, wherever they're made, by this company that made sure it had the right flame retardant capabilities, it had the right button count, the right thread count, and so forth. So that's Fourth Strand. I'll give you just a couple funny stories. As we got going, it's myself and two other guys. One other guy came from Bain as well. The third guy actually was an engineer. I'm not. I play it sometimes. But we had a pretty important meeting. A guy who took over all private brand for Home Depot called us up, and he said, he was speccing out this huge program. He said, I want you to manage all the private brand testing. Myself and one of my partners were there. And he said, I'm concerned though, I know you're a small company. Are you guys big enough to do this kind of program? And I said, well, at this point it was myself and just two partners. I said, well, to be honest with you, it is a big program, and what I can commit to you is at a minimum, I'm going to put my top 3 senior resources on this program, and they're going to work on it nonstop. And he's like, okay, that's good enough for me. So that got us going. We found ourselves in positions where we'd have merchants call and say, do you know how to test lithium-ion batteries? Absolutely. And I'd go to the engineering team, I'm like, do you know how to test lithium-ion batteries? He's like, we'll figure it out. We'll start making some calls. So a lot of it, we said yes, and then we thought we could figure it out afterwards. And we've been fortunate, we've been able to do it. We were able to build a pretty good team. We ended up continuing to have a great lifestyle, and we were able to make a few bucks on that deal. So that was a success as well. Let me share with you just some of the critical themes. And there's a lot of text on here, and if you can get copies of this, maybe some of these will resonate with you. I'm not going to belabor each one, but I tried to put them into some natural categories. And I'll start with more of a macro or big picture focus. We didn't create a business and then go out and try to find somebody that would pay us for it. In both cases, we had somebody saying, I want it, I'm going to pay you, then we created the business. So we didn't put ourselves in a position where we had to go out and do silly price cutting or do something else to win the business. Both of our businesses had what I'd call an asymmetrical risk profile. Our downside was pretty limited. If Cold Fire hadn't worked out, I'd have gone and gotten a real job. I wouldn't have been out any money. If Strand hadn't worked out, I'd have gone and gotten a real job. I wouldn't be out any money, but the upside was pretty big. So the upside dwarfed the downside in those cases. And in both these, I didn't quit my day job to go after the startup or the dream job. So I was working at PartsMaster, that industrial tool distributor, while we conceived of and built Cold Fire. Cold Fire really came into existence as we were running Cold Fire, or Strand, excuse me, came into existence while we were running Cold Fire. From a setup standpoint, trusted, proven partners that also have equal entrepreneurial bents, and that aren't completely headset that we each have to do the same amount of work in this space, and this space. We know what we're good at. Each of us were pretty good at saying, I'm going to take this because I think I can differentially contribute here. And there's a saying, my fully developed strengths in the organization are always going to contribute more than my marginally enhanced weaknesses. And we've been able to buy into that, and we really pushed that. And so that helped us be good partners with each other. We discussed the exit options on the business probably as much as anything when we got started. Literally in front of a whiteboard for days. How are we going to sell this thing? Who are we going to sell it to? What are we going to have to do to create the demand to sell it? We spent as much time focused on exit options as we did anything else when we got started. All with the mindset of, if those never materialized, if nothing else, we've driven the company to have the best cash position possible. For us, both ventures were business to business as opposed to business to consumer, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. For us, lifestyle became a non-negotiable element. So we decided up front that we were going to craft the business around what we wanted to do personally. And then lastly, and a really important one, was just a willingness to get going. I'll talk about this too in a little bit more detail later, but I think most of the startups that don't happen it's a failure just to do it and just to get going. From a legal standpoint, this is one that I see overlooked so frequently. We spent a ton of time before we ever had a penny of business in the bank from a customer putting in place an operating agreement. And it sounds simple, but it's really like a detailed insurance plan. It's, if my partner dies, does his wife get the share? Does she become an owner of the company? Does she become one of the managers of the company? If I want to sell the company and my two partners don't, how do we handle that? We tried to think through every scenario that might exist, and then we put it down on paper, and then we put it in a drawer, and we've never looked at it again. But it set the context to avoid a whole lot of downstream headaches, and it's amazing how often that bites people in the butt. And it wasn't just our partnership agreement with each other. We did the same thing with employment agreements. We did the same thing with customer contracts. And the reality is it put us in a position to be much more saleable. When we start interacting with big companies, they can see that we know what we're doing. They can see that we have a big company approach. We've minimized their threat of litigation down the road from us doing something improperly. And we created and defended intellectual property. So on both companies, we set up, we filed for patents. We were awarded patents in one case. Another one's still pending. To be honest with you, I think not enough time to get into it today, but big companies, at least in the space we're in, put a big value on patents. I think it's a big waste of time. But we did it because we thought people would pay for it. And then from an operations standpoint, both of these, the economic engine, which is a term from Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great, we knew exactly what the economic engine was on both models. We knew exactly how we're going to make cash. Not sales, not profit. We knew exactly how we're going to make cash, which is really the only thing for a small company that matters. Both organizations were set up to minimize support headcount. So accounting, HR, legal. I'll give you an example with Cold Fire. We never sent out an invoice a single time in that company's history. We set up a contract with a customer. They were fixed price, 4-year, non-cancelable contracts. The vendors had to pay us on the 1st in advance for that month's billings. So we could go on vacation for 6 months, and as long as we had a bank account open, we were still in business and nobody knew anything different. We always price our service based on value, very unashamedly. So actually using data to create a storyline when I'm sitting down with somebody and saying, here's what our service costs and here's why. There's a real tendency, especially in a startup environment where you're trying to win business and you want to create big successes, to just start discounting and to take cheap business. And low-calorie business just doesn't do anybody any good. So we try to go after high-calorie revenue dollars, all with a straight face. Having some knowledge on how large companies run was actually critical to our success. And I mentioned I wasn't ready to go into the startup world right out of college. Actually knowing how big companies work, knowing where the shortcomings are, knowing where political issues come to bear, all that stuff really helped us as we positioned ourselves for sale, as we positioned ourselves to win additional business. We managed our books like we were a public company. So we did accrual-based accounting. Everything was booked just like as if we were a real company. And the reason we did it, one, it makes you where you can actually sell the company, puts you in a position where if you had to go out and raise cash, you can do it, puts you in a position where you can establish trust amongst your partners, because there's no doubt on what money is and where it went and how much you've made. And more importantly, as a small business, it helps you understand how much you can distribute to pay yourself. We hired A players and we took care of them. For instance, at Strand, we put in place what we thought were above market salaries for every person we hired. Food was provided in the office, both breakfast and lunch. 100% of every dollar of benefits were covered. Nobody had a single health care payment of any sort. So we tried to create I wear flip-flops to work every day. I'll put on nice clothes if I have to go to a meeting, and I'll come back and I'm back in shorts and flip-flops. So we tried to create an environment people wanted to be in. We also did the same with the customer. And so what we've realized is, for us, where we're dealing in big company situations, finding those people at the client that are at a position, that have a level of influence in their organization that is very different than their current position, those are the people we try to lock onto, because those are the folks that are going to get promoted and carry us with them. And then exit, lastly, we actually help drive the exit demand. So we call it inception type planning. Literally, we look at the companies we thought were going to be in a position to buy us. We said, where are we going to find their business development people? Let's actually figure out if they're at a trade show, let's be present at the trade show. Let's figure out a reason to have an introduction or have a conversation with them. Let's see if we can plant a thought in their head without blatantly pimping the business, but to see if they can start thinking about it, and we'll nurture that relationship and be in a position to sell. So finding and recognizing startup opportunities. And this is from my standpoint, my partner's standpoint. Again, it's all art. This isn't going to work for everybody, but this is what I believe. And I'll start off just at a high level with industry. In my mind, the industry is absolutely irrelevant. I could care less what the business is. If there is a good economic model in picking up sludge from food processing facilities, I would go after it. And there is. That's a business my brother's in. But no Harvard MBA is trying to go to work in food and beverage processing sludge removal. But there's a great business. The next one is a saying one of my professors had in business school, which is go where they ain't. And that one's always just stuck with me. There are so many sectors right now where people flood into IT-based stuff and software-based stuff. There are so many ways to make money in other places, and I'd rather compete with fewer people. So try to focus on niches, both of the ones I was involved in. I never thought I'd be in cryogenic processing. I never thought I'd be in testing services. When somebody asked my wife what I do for a living, she's like, just all kind of random stuff. I mean, none of it really makes sense. We just kind of found our way there. And for us, business to business was a better fit. It's much easier to exploit a need of a big company or a gap or something they can't do than go out and try to create demand or shift consumer demand, which is really hard to do. Some key themes, and these can be standalone, they can complement each other. Disparity in power along the value chain. So just to provide you some context for what I mean, Home Depot is an $80 billion a year retailer. You get any product on the wall in their stores and it's worth $20 million a year at least, and that's a really, really small number. They've got categories that are just huge. So when Depot tells somebody to do something, they say, yes, sir, can I have another? We put in place an offering that was very beneficial to Home Depot. Home Depot told people, hey, we want you to do this. So we took advantage of an imbalance in the power chain. The company that bought us, that does certification testing, it's funny, it's a bunch of Republicans, most all the people, and they are all voting for Obama, and they are lobbying for Obama, because there's going to be, and this is not a political statement, I don't care what your party is that you go for, but there's additional regulation the government is going to force companies to have to do. They're going to have to hire somebody in order to say they meet code. And so this company is lobbying big time to have Obama win because they think they're going to get rich. Where there's a gap between the experience and the expectation, that's taking advantage of what goes on in a lot of big company environments. The next point where there's important items or occurrences or events that are discussed hypothetically where you can put data to it. With coal fire, all we did is we just said, we can make this product better and we can prove it to you. With Strand, everybody said their product was the best, but not everybody's product can be the best. And we said, we'll just test them and we'll look at the data and we'll tell you who's really best. The next one, carefully listen to identify build versus buy decisions or significant points of frustrations for larger companies. What I find myself having a hard time doing now, the parent company that just bought us, that's a $4 billion company out of London, I have to get involved in a lot of corporate stuff, and I'll sit in meetings and they'll be talking about different things they want to get done, and I know it'll never happen because there's political debates between departments, or they're not going to raise cash flow or cash for this because they've got some corporate edict, they can't fund anything over a certain amount. I find myself consistently thinking, I'll go start it and just sell it to them. I'll go do that and I'll just sell it to them. It's really easy to spot opportunities when you know what you're looking for. And then lastly, just like real estate, there's a lot of cash-strapped small companies today. And if you've got cash or access to cash, you can buy stuff really cheap. So while most startups never fail or don't even get started, why they fail. I've mentioned this a while ago. And again, this is just my experience. So this isn't, I didn't go out and research anything and say this is what the typical findings are. But legal steps such as the operating agreement get overlooked. This is where I'm most familiar with it, where I've had friends say, help me think through how I would start this up. And I've had lunch with people and their partners. And then it's amazing how often, literally within a month, often something just goes to heck. And they've broken up and everybody's out a lot of cash. And if they had an operating agreement, it wouldn't happen, or at least they would have been protected. You have businesses that are based on a personal passion. A lot of folks will say, go after what you're really passionate about, then you've got the sweet spot. And for some people, that might be an absolute truth. For me, I don't think it's the case. Again, I could care less what the industry is. I care more about the economics. I have a friend who wanted to start a gym. He was a personal trainer. And we're sitting down saying, you're going to be chasing membership dues. You're going to be plunging toilets. You're not going to be working with people in a gym. And he invested all his money and he lost all his money. I just happen to be right in that case, not that I always am. A lot of folks go after remote probabilities that have huge theoretical payoffs. You don't have to hit a grand slam every time. There's a lot of triples and a lot of doubles. Cash flow is not properly managed. I talked about that a little while ago. And then exit options don't get considered. It's often where you find yourself losing one customer or you lose one big deal and you find yourself in a bit of a bind. If you haven't thought through what are the exit scenarios around the company, John Wooden, the old coach from UCLA, had a great saying, which was, when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. And so think through it and have a sense for what might be coming up. And then this is the one I see more often. So in my position, I've got a lot of friends that are in corporate world. It's amazing how often someone will say, Dave, can we get together? I want to run some ideas by you. Always wanted to do a startup. I've got all these ideas. And you just know it's never going to happen. And it's for a number of reasons. One, most people tend to live right up to the level of their earnings. And there's just no margin. You know, you find a great opportunity, something comes your way, you have an idea you want to pursue, but you've tended to buy a little bit bigger house when your salary went up, or you bought a bigger car, and you just don't have anything saved. So this is getting a little preachy, but just something to think about, because this is why most folks don't end up getting to do something. The disease of someday, which for most people is what takes it, they take it to the grave with them. How many folks I've sat down with and said, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, and it's just never going to happen. It's a 3-year plan that keeps getting pushed out every year, and it's always 3 years out. The process itself is confusing and intimidating. You'll meet you'll try to set up a company and you'll talk to an attorney and they'll tell you you need to be an LLC, someone else will say an S Corp, someone else will say no, be a C Corp. You'll talk to the accountant and they'll say, well, I don't really know, that's more of a legal thing. The legal guy will say, no, that's really an accounting thing. The reality is there's lots of different ways you can put it together and you just got to get in there and you got to start. And then lastly, most people, even if they think they want to do a startup, what I've come to believe is most people just don't have a risk profile to do it. Most people like security in the known versus the unknown, and whatever that potential upside might be. And so it's just something to think about. Most of the people I know that say they want to do startups, but they haven't, it's just because it's probably not the right thing for them. So a couple random observations, and this is my last page. If I were sitting in your shoes, there are some classes that I would differentially focus on, knowing what I know now. For me, and again, it's not for everybody, but cost accounting, I've employed in every single situation I've ever been in. Statistics, we employ in every single day we do statistics. In fact, we actually just hired a grad from this university that when she graduated 2 years ago, she went and got a master's in statistics at NC State. She recently just started with us. So we have a grad from North Georgia College, soon to be University of North Georgia. Business writing and public speaking. I'll give you an example. When I was in grad school, I had a professor, you got one case a week, and when you met to go over it, you turned in your brief, and then you talked about the case from last week. You had 26 lines on a page to present your argument. Had to be at least a 10-size font. So the cases were 50-page Harvard Business Review cases. You would start off, it would be at least 5 pages, single space for an answer. You had to get it down to 26 lines, 10 font. Every person in the room had the exact same amount of real estate to present an argument. And it was the best class I ever took because it made you so focused in what really mattered and how you presented it. So those are just some thoughts on classes. My recommendation, there's going to be some folks in this room that are ready to go out and start something up tomorrow. I wasn't when I was at that point in life, but go get a real job, preferably in consulting. And the reason I say consulting is it gives you such exposure. You work in a bunch of different industries on almost every problem type you can think of. If the Accentures of the world, the Deloitte & Touche, more of the accounting-oriented consulting groups don't come to your campus, I would go plant my butt in the admissions department or the placement director's office and say, what do we need to do to get them here? When I was at Chapel Hill for grad school, Boston Consulting Group and McKinsey didn't come to UNC. And my friend and I, that both wanted to go into consulting, we were nominated to be head of the consulting club, which we didn't even know what that meant. But what we ended up doing was getting a trip of 50 students organized to go to Boston and meet with these groups. And they ended up coming on campus as a result of that. And that's how we ended up getting jobs with the companies we wanted to. This one, you've probably heard people say, you don't start at the top, be president whatever you're doing, really work your tail off, succeed, and you're going to get opportunities. I'd mentioned, early on, I was so focused on money and other things, I know I let a lot of cool stuff just go by right under my nose that would have been really fun to participate in. Just don't get so focused on the long term, you forget the near term. Read great and diverse authors that inspire and inform your thinking. I think anything Seth Godin writes is dynamite. Anything Malcolm Gladwell writes is dynamite. I bake all that stuff, Jim Collins, all that stuff in how we manage our companies. Just dynamite guys. Journal your learnings along the way, both the successes and the failure. I wish I had started doing this early on. I started journaling maybe 6 years ago. John Maxwell, who's a leadership author, says that experience is only the best teacher if you actually reflect on that experience. And I believe it to be the case. There's just too many things going on. If you don't write it down and journal it, you're going to forget so much of what you think you'll never forget. Live meetings followed by phone calls are going to massively trump emails or text or anything else to make something meaningful happen. And a nice touch is also handwritten cards. I say this because there's such a tendency for folks these days, even people we hire, they want to do everything by email, and there's just, you can't interpret tone properly in emails. There's so many things that can go wrong. It's so easy to say things in an email you would otherwise not say to somebody's face. People forward stuff, they blind carbon copy stuff. You can do live meetings, it just, at least in our business, in any business, it's going to benefit you. Continuously network. It sounds like a simple thing. Most people don't do it. It's so easy to get engaged in what you're doing in your job. I probably do at least 1 lunch a week, often 2 lunches a week with people that I either don't know that well or that I haven't met at all, but somebody said you need to meet this person. Malcolm Gladwell in the book Outliers writes about this, that weak ties or just having good social connectivity has such an amazing economic advantage to it over time, and it's the truth. If and when you do choose to pursue a startup, and just make sure it's congruent with the other items in your life that are critical to you. For me, it's my family, it's faith, it's all the other stuff I like to do. Figure out what's important to you and just fit it around that. I used to think success was making a lot of money. And I remember my dad early on said, if you just work hard and do good things, you're going to make plenty of money. Don't worry about it. That'll come. This last one, John Maxwell's definition of success is when the people who are closest to you and know you the best love and respect you the most. And I can say I've watched both my parents model that and something I hope I model as well. So anyways, that's the conclusion of what I have. I'm happy to take any questions anybody has. And I apologize for talking fast. I don't know if you ever do for sure. I'll give you an example. In our case, with the first company we sold, Cold Fire, we had reached a point where I mentioned there were 4-year contracts and a lot of them were coming up for renewal. And in retrospect, we had priced pretty amazingly high in those contracts. We knew there was no way we were going to renew them at that price. So our thought was, if we don't sell soon, we're going to go off an economic cliff. And so that got us to the point that we thought it was time to do it. With Strand, it was a much harder argument. It was much harder for us to decide to do it because we were growing like crazy. We had every economic number you could think of was strong and moving in the right direction. And it was a little bit of just to sit down and between myself or amongst myself and my two partners, we just made the determination that we have about a 3 to 5 year attention span on any one activity. And at that point you get bored and we wanted to just move on to something else. And we decided that if we were to sell it now, we knew we were going to have to stay on in some sort of a transition capacity. And so we started just doing the math on the timing. And we said, you know what? We can make a good buck on it now. You never really know what the future is going to hold. And let's get out. You know, alternatively, if we waited and the profit had continued to grow the way it has been, we probably could have made a whole lot more money in a year or two. But you're never going to know. There's so many things that could have changed. I mean, I've heard it stated before, it was, well, no, we just didn't know. I mean, so we decided it was time to go and let's move. I wish I had perfect knowledge and I could time it perfectly, I would. But we could have left a lot of money on the table, or we could have killed it because we would have gone out of business. I just don't know. I think for us, we had pretty good, we were very blessed in that we had a couple ideas that it's not like we just had a stroke of genius and this idea came up. It really evolved from a potential client saying, I'll pay you to do this. So starting it and coming up with the idea wasn't really difficult. Putting the pieces in place right to actually get it growing was a little bit more complex. So I think managing it and actually beginning to scale it is more difficult. Seth Godin writes about an event called the dip, which is you'll start going up, but there tends to be a downturn before you really go up. And I think there's something to that. What we've decided, at least my two partners and I, where we really enjoy, I mean, where I get the most fun out of is that creative phase. Actually putting it all together, building the business plan, getting somebody to say, I'm going to write you a check, and actually getting it all going. We've been real fortunate with our last one. Is we hired just some dynamite people that have made the scaling of it a little bit easier. But yeah, every success just begets new challenges. And so as you grow it, it certainly becomes more difficult, I think. One, you partner with people that you're equally yoked with, that have the same mindset, and they can complement each other. So the same mindset doesn't mean the same skill sets, but that have the same desires in terms of what they want to achieve with the business. For us, or for me, actually putting it all into a very, very detailed operating agreement got us way out of all kind of issues we could have experienced. Where I have friends who are in partnerships and they go sideways with each other, it's one person wants to run their car through the company, one person wants to do this. We set our business up in a way where my share of my companies was held through a S-Corp I owned 100% of, and that held my share in the entities. If I wanted to expense anything or run anything through it, I ran it through my S-Corp, never affected anybody else's earnings. We all had the same ideas that we're in this to start it, create a cool environment, create some cool opportunities for some people, live a good lifestyle, and then hopefully make a good dollar and move on to the next one. And so when I say equally yoked, that's the mindset of the two people that I partnered with. And it's not like I met them and overnight knew it. We worked together long enough that we came to the conclusion we had a pretty good fit. I would encourage you, the consulting groups, and whether it's the Accentures or the Deloitte & Touche, Bain and McKinsey, BCG are just, they hire so few people out of undergrad, it's very difficult to get into. But those other firms hire a ton of people and you get great exposure to a lot of businesses. Where I think there's just a dynamite fit there for anybody that's trying to figure out where they want to go. You might do a project for 6 months in the retail space. Then you might do it in aircraft manufacturing. Then you might go into a web-based enterprise. You work across so many different types of businesses and you address them from so many different angles that it helps you put into practice the things you're learning about in a textbook right now. And it just gives you a little bit better sense for what you really might want to do. That said, I'm a small company, so I try to make the argument when people come in to hire that this is an awesome environment because you've got people that are going to try to actually grow you as a business person, as an entrepreneur. You can get into some small companies and you're working for the boss and you're doing what he or she says and that's all you do. You know, if you get the right fit, there's a lot of companies that are managed by a lot of smart people that you can learn a whole lot from. A lot of it's just going to be on who you line up with.